Welcome to my humble abode, darlings. Come in out of the rain and get comfortable. I have a story to tell you, and I hope you enjoy. If you do, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Chapter 18, Vanikoro. This terrible spectacle was the forerunner of a series of maritime catastrophes that the Nautilus was destined to meet with in its route. As long as it went through more frequented waters, we often saw the hulls of shipwrecked vessels that were rotting in the depths, and deeper down cannons, bullets, anchors, chains, and 1,000 other iron materials eaten up by rust. However, on the 11th of December, we sighted the Palmetto Islands, the old dangerous group of Bougainville that extended over a space of 500 leagues at east-southeast to west-northwest from the island Ducie of that of Lazareff. This group covered an area of 370 square leagues, and it is formed of 60 groups of islands, among which the Gambier group is remarkable, over which France exercises sway. These are coral islands, slowly raised but continuous, created by the daily work of polypi. Then this new island will be joined later on to the neighboring groups of the fifth continent, will stretch from New Zealand and New Caledonia, and from thence to the Marquesas. One day when I was suggesting this theory to Captain Nemo, he replied coldly, "The Earth does not want new continents, but new men." Chance had conducted the Nautilus towards the island of Clermont-Tonnerre, one of the most curious of the group. That was discovered in 1822 by Captain Bell of the Minerva. I could study now the madreporial system to which are due the islands in the ocean. Madrepores, which must not be mistaken for corals, have a tissue lined with a calcareous crust, and the modifications of its structure may have induced Monsieur Milne Edwards, my worthy master, to class them into 5 sections. The animalcule that the marine polyps secrets live by millions at the bottom of their cells. Of their cells, their calcareous deposits become rock, reef, and large and small islands. Here they form a ring surrounding a little inland lake that communicates with the sea by means of gaps. There were making barriers of reefs like those on the coasts of New Caledonia and the other various Pompton Islands. In other places, like those at Reunion and the Maurice, they raise fringed reefs, high straight walls, near which the depths of the ocean is considerable. Some cable lengths off the shore of the island of Clermont, I admired the gigantic work accomplished by these microscopical workers. These walls are specifically the work of those madrepores known as millipores, porites, madrepores, and astraes. These polypi are found particularly in the rough beds of the sea, near the surface, and consequently it is from the upper part that they begin their operations, in which they bury themselves by degree with the debris of the secretions that support them. Such is, at least, Darwin's theory, who thus explains the formation of the atolls, a superior theory, to my mind, to the given of the foundations of the madreporical's works, summits of mountains or volcanoes that are submerged some feet below the level of the sea. I could observe closely these curious walls. For their perpendicularity, they were more than 300 yards deep, and our electric sheets lighted up this calcareous matter brilliantly. Replying to the question Consuel asked me as to the time these colossal barriers took to be raised, I astonished him much by telling him that learned men reckoned it about the 1/8 of an inch in 100 years. Towards evening, Clermont-Tonnerre was lost in the distance, and the route of the Nautilus was sensibly changed. After having crossed the Tropic of Cancer in 135 longitude, it sailed west-northwest, making again for the tropical zone. Although the summer sun was very strong, we did not suffer from heat, for at 15 or 20 fathoms below the surface, the temperature did not rise above from 10 to 12 degrees. On the 15th of December, we left to the east the bewitching group of the Societies and the graceful Tahini, Queen of the Pacific. I saw in the morning, some miles to the windward, the elevated summits of the island. These waters furnished our tables with excellent fish, mackerel, bonitos, and some variants of a sea serpent. On the 25th of December, the Nautilus sailed into the midst of the New Hebrides, discovered by Quiros in 1606, that the Bougainville explored in 1768, and to which Cook gave its present names in 1773. This group is comprised principally of 9 large islands that form a band of 120 leagues, NNS to SSW, between 15 and 2% south latitude, and 164 degrees and 168 long. We passed tolerably near to the island of Aro, that at noon looked like a mass of green woods, surmounted by a peak of great heights. That day, being Christmas Day, Ned Land seemed to regret sorely the non-celebration of Christmas, the family feat of which Protestants are so fond. I had not seen Captain Nemo for a week when, on the morning of the 27th, he came into the largest drawing room, always seeming as if he had seen you 5 minutes before. I was busily tracing the route of the Nautilus on the planisphere. The captain came up to me, put his fingers on one spot on the chart, and said this single word, Valicoro. The effect was magical. It was the name of the islands on which La Périose had been lost. I rose suddenly. The Nautilus has brought us to Vanicoro? I asked. Yes, Professor, said the captain. And I can visit the celebrated islands where the Boussole and the Astrolabe struck? If you like, Professor. When shall we be there? We are there now. Followed by Captain Nemo, I went up onto the platform and greedily scanned the horizon. To the northeast, 2 volcanic islands emerged of unequal size, surrounded by a coral reef that measured 40 miles in circumference. We were close to Vanicoro, really the one to which Dumont Urberville gave the name of the island de la Rochère, and exactly facing the little harbor of Vanneau, situated in 16 degrees 4 south latitude and 64 degrees 32 east longitude. The earth seemed covered with verdure from the shore to the summit in the interior that were crowned by Mount Capogo, 476 feet high. The Nautilus, having passed the outer belt of rocks by a narrow strait, found itself among the breakers, where the sea was from 30 to 40 fathoms deep. Under the verdant shade of some mangroves, I perceived some savages who appeared greatly surprised at our approach. In the long black body moving between wind and water, they did not see, for some formidable cetacean that they regarded with suspicion. Just then Captain Nemo asked me what I knew of the wreck of La Période. Only what everyone knows, Captain, I replied. And could you tell me what everyone knows about it? He inquired ironically. Easily. I related to him all that the last works of Dumont d'Urberville had made known, works for which the following is a brief account. La Période and his second, Captain de Langle, were sent by Louis XVI in 1785 on a voyage of circumnavigation. They embarked in the corvettes Blasson and the Astrolabe, neither of which were again heard of. In 1791, the French government, justly uneasy as to the fate of these slopes, managed two large merchantmen, the Rocher and the Espérance, which left Brest the 28th of September under the command of Brunei d'Entrecasteaux. 2 months after, they learned from Bowen, commander of the Albemarle, that the debris of shipwrecked vessels had been seen on the coast of New Georgia. But d'Entrecasteaux, ignoring this communication, rather uncertain, beside directed his course towards the Admiralty Islands mentioned in a report of Captain Hunter as being the place where La Perros was wrecked. They sought in vain. The Espérance and the Rocher passed before Vanikoro without stopping there, and in fact this voyage was most disastrous, as it cost d'Entrecasteaux his life, and those of 2 of his lieutenants, besides several of his crew. Captain Dillon, a shrewd old Pacific sailor, was the first to find unmistakable traces of the wreckage on the 15th of May, 1824. His vessel, the St. Patrick, passed close to Tikopia, one of the New Hebrides. There, a Lencar came alongside in a canoe, sold him the handle of a sword in silver that bore the print of characters engraved on the hilt. The Lencar presented that 6 years before, during a stay at Vanikoro, he had seen 2 Europeans that belonged to some vessels that had run aground on the reef some years ago. Dillon guessed that he meant La Perros, whose disappearance had troubled the whole world. He tried to get on to Vanikoro, where, according to the Lencar, he would find numerous debris of the wreckage, but winds and tides prevented him. Dillon returned to Calcutta. There he interested the Asiatic Society and the Indian Company in his discovery. A vessel to which was given the name of the Rocher was put at his disposal, and he set out 23rd of January, 1827, accompanied by a French agent. The Rocher, after touching at several points in the Pacific, cast anchor before Vanikoro, 7th of July, 1827, in the same harbor of Vano where the Nautilus was at this time. There it collected numerous relics of the wreck: iron utensils, anchors, pulley stops, swivel guns, an 18-pound shot, fragments of astronomical instruments, a piece of crown work, and a bronze clock bearing this inscription: Bazin Ma Fate, the mark of the foundry of the arsenal at Brest about 1785. There could be no further doubt. Dillon, having made all inquiries, stayed in the unlucky place until October, then quitted Vanikoro and directed his course towards New Zealand, put into Calcutta the 7th of April, 1828, and returned to France, where he was warmly welcomed by Charles X. But at the same time, without knowing Dillon's movements, Dumont d'Urville had already set out to find the scene of the wreck, and they had learned from a whaler that some medals and a cross of St. Louis had been found in the hands of some savages of Louisant and New Caledonia. Dumont d'Urville, commander of the Astrolabe, had then sailed, and 2 months after Dillon had left Vanikoro, he put into Hobart Town. There he learned the results of Dillon's inquiry and found that a certain James Hobb, second lieutenant of the Union of Calcutta, after landing on the island situated 8 degrees 18 south latitude and 156 degrees 30 east longitude, had seen some iron bars and redstuffs used by the natives of these parts. Dumont d'Urville Much perplexed and not knowing how to credit the reports of low-class journals, decided to follow Dillon's track. On the 10th of February, 1826, the astrolabe appeared off Tikopia and took as guide and interpreter a deserter found on the island, made his way to Vanikoro, sighted it on the 12th instant, lay among the reefs until the 14th, and not until the 20th did he cast anchor within the barrier in the harbor of Vano. On the 23rd, several officers went round the island and brought back some unimportant trifles. The natives, adopting a system of denial and evasion, refused to take them to the unlucky place. This ambiguous conduct led them to believe that the natives had ill-treated the castaways, and indeed they seemed to fear that Dumont d'Urberville had come to avenge La Pérouse and his unfortunate crew. However, on the 26th, appeased by some presents, and understanding that they had no reprisals to fear, they led Monsieur Jacquereau to the scene of the wreck. There, in 3 or 4 fathoms of water, between the reefs of Paco and Vano, lay anchors, cannons, pigs of lead and iron, embedded in the limy consecrations. The large boat and the whaler belonging to the astrolabe were sent to this place, and not without some difficulty. Their crews hauled up an anchor weighing 1,800 pounds, and a brass gun, some pigs of iron, and 2 copper swivel guns. Dumont d'Urberville questioned the natives, learned too that La Pérouse, after losing both his vessels on the reefs of this island, had constructed a smaller boat, only to be lost a second time, where no one knew. But the French government, fearing that Dumont d'Urberville were not acquainted with Dillon's movements, had sent the sloop Bayonnaise, commanded by Legrand de Tromelin, to Vanikoro, which had been stationed on the west coast of America. The Bayonnaise cast her anchor before Vanikoro some months after the departure of the astrolabe, but found no new document, but stated that the savages had respected the monument to La Pérouse. That is the substance of what I told Captain Nemo. Whew. So, he said, no one knows now where the 3rd vessel perished was constructed by the castaways on the island of Vanikoro. No one knows. Captain Nemo said nothing, but signed to me to follow him into the large saloon. The Nautilus sank several yards below the waves, and the panels were opened. I hastened to the aperture, and under the crustaceans of coral, covered with fungi, siphonoles, alcyons, madrepores, through the myriad of charming fish, grilles, gilphalcidri, pomfretes, diacorps, and holocene trees, I recognized certain debris that the drags had not been able to tear up. Iron stirrups, anchors, cannons, bullets, capstan fittings, the stem of a ship, all objects clearly proving the wreck of some vessel, and now carpeted with living flowers. While I was looking on this desolate scene, Captain Nemo said in a sad voice, Commander La Pérouse set out on the 7th of December, 1785, with his vessel La Boussole and the astrolabe. He first cast anchor at Botany Bay, visited the Friendly Isles, New Caledonia, and then directed his course towards Santa Cruz, and put into Namuka, one of the Hypate group. Then his vessels struck on the unknown reef of the Vanikoro. The Boussole, which first ran aground to the southerly coast, the astrolabe went to its help and ran aground too. The first vessel was destroyed almost immediately. The second, stranded under the wind, resisted some days. The natives made the castaways welcome. They installed themselves in the island and constructed a smaller boat with the debris of the two larger ones. Some sailors stayed willingly at Vanikoro. The others, weak and ill, set out with La Perouse. They directed their course towards the Solomon Islands. And there they perished with everything on the westerly coast of the chief island of the group, between Capes Deception and Satisfaction. How do you know that? By this. That I found on the spot was the last wreck. Captain Nemo showed me a template box stamped with the French arms and corroded by the salt water. He opened it and I saw a bundle of papers, yellow but still readable. They were the instructions of the naval minister to Commander La Perouse, annotated in the margin in Louis XVI's handwriting. "Ah, it is a fine death for a sailor," said Captain Nemo at last. "A coral tomb made a quiet grave, and I trust that I and my comrades will find no other." So quoth this raven. And I do hope Lord Pipey enjoys my stumbling Latin again, and I wish you all a very wonderful week. What? You're still here after the whole story? I really appreciate that, darlings. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And I always love to hear from you. Have a glorious day, my darlings.